Hello, I'm Holly Jennings and I'm with the Glasgow Guardian. Today I'm with Miko Mojsiej and we're going to be interviewing him for the SRC president. Miko, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Miko. I'm currently studying law here in Glasgow, and I'm running to be our next SRC president for this year. I'm really passionate about advocating for students and campaigning. I've been doing it for a few years. I've mainly been focusing on immigration rights, but I have also been campaigning for student immigration rights specifically as well.
Lovely. Okay, so Miko, you're up against a candidate who has served a year already on the SRC Executive Council. What experience do you have that you think makes you qualified for the job?
So I've been, since 2016, I've been campaigning and advocating for the rights of immigrants. During that time, I've been in many meetings with people in power, MSPs, MPs. I've had sort of many discussions. But apart from campaigning as well, obviously it is an administrative job as well. Before I started university, I was working as a supervisor in retail. I don't think I can say which shop necessarily, but I was a supervisor in retail, and that involved many things, making rotas, running the shop, relations with staff and things like that. So I think that although my experience on the SRC isn't what Ella's is, I do have experience that is very similar in a sense that I have done administrative and campaigning advocating jobs before.
Okay, fantastic. Well, moving on to your manifesto, a key point of yours is that in the last 12 months, accountability has been put on the back burner. Mm-hmm. In this statement, are you speaking about the university or the SRC?
I'm speaking about both. In general, it is not just exclusive to this university, but obviously, if we're focusing on this university, students and the SRC, there has been just so much going on. And I don't want to blame the SRC for this or the university fully, but there seems to be that decisions are made and students are told what these decisions are. And especially going back to when university started under code regulations, the fact that students, especially first years, were told that they have to come the week before to have that full experience. And then once they signed on the dotted line and signed themselves up for university and paid those fees, they were told it's all going to be online. And for me, it just seemed like there wasn't enough pressure and backlash against that, and there really ought to be.
Is there anything specifically that you would have done differently?
So if I was in a position like that, I acknowledge that it was a hard position. I acknowledge that the current SRC members were elected under different circumstances, because it was last March they were elected. They had no idea this was going to happen. But if that was me in this situation, I think that I would definitely be more vocal and demanding, and definitely more, not necessarily in a way that, what's the best way to explain this actually? The university does rely on students to function, and as the SRC you do represent students, and there is a lot of power there, a lot of reach that you can use so that students can actually, an example would be to protest, possibly to organize a strike. But these are examples. I don't want to get too much into direct, because obviously I wasn't in that position and I don't want to say what I would have done differently, but along those lines.
Okay. Another key point in your manifesto is that you will join the NUS.
Yes.
Previously, when students have voted on this, there's been an overwhelming majority of students against joining. What makes you think that this is a good idea now, especially when it can cost thousands of pounds to be affiliated with the NUS?
So I'd like to say that I'm not just going to join the NUS. I plan to have a referendum, a full campus referendum, where obviously we'd have to negotiate with the university as to what the turnout for that would be, so that would depend on that. But as to obviously I believe it was 2009 that the last referendum was, the circumstances were vastly different. This year has really, I think, shown the need for collective bargaining with students. And I think that personally for me, that is what the NUS gives you. It gives you a huge amount of collective bargaining power. As to the fees, there's been a lot of talk about the fees, I've noticed in my comment section. So the fees from 2009, I believe, were about £50,000, which was at that point 5% of block grant that the SRC receives. This year, and the foreseeable years, it's 2.5% of the block grant, which is much, much lower. And also in a way of the money isn't just disappearing. You are getting that money back. You're getting it back in many different ways, in services. Actually, just this year, the NUS got the SRC £44,000. So if you count that in a block grant way, they've actually funded 4 years of it in US membership just this year. So I think the fees are very much offset, and then some as well.
That's a really interesting point. Off the back of that, you also say in your manifesto that you would stop the advertising of private landlords, yeah, and you would also introduce a temporary COVID officer. Mm-hmm. So obviously following COVID, the SRC is in a bit more of a fickle financial position, as so many businesses are. Yeah. So with all these big changes in mind, how do you plan on funding these plans?
Well, the SRC for the last few years has made a profit, so there is money there, and with joining the NUS, I personally think that it would actually save us money. For example, in 2019, I believe, I don't know the figures for this year because they haven't been released yet, but in 2019, the SRC did make, I think it was £18,000 in profit, and I guess I'm guessing that money hasn't just disappeared. So all those years of profit making, we have to have some sort of money that is there for us to be used. And with that, you do get block grants, and I believe the block grants are increasing slightly, just because I think it depends what happens with this election. But I believe many parties and manifestos do have in their manifestos that the funding for student bodies is to increase. Obviously, they vary party by party, but the overwhelming thought that I have is that it's probably going to increase. So the funding will come, and we do have enough leeway to stop advertising unethical companies. I don't want to get into any names, but there's just certain companies where you look at it and you're like, so the SRC and the university is supposed to be promoting these green ideals, but they're funding the companies that maybe do not promoting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Speaking of kind of green ideals, you have environmental policy, which is fantastic in your manifesto. But do you think it's enough? You speak about carbon neutrality. Mm-hmm. Do you have any actual dates for when you'd like to see this done by? Because of course we can all sit here and say, oh, it'd be great to do this, but is there anything specific and timeframes that you...
Well, obviously, the term of the SRC president is 12 months. And so I would aim to have accomplished the carbon neutrality part as before the end of my term. There's obviously many changes that have to be made for that to happen. And I am definitely ready to start carrying out those changes as soon as I think the term starts in July. And as soon as I start in July, I do plan to start implementing environmental changes. Going forward to the renewable energy part as well, it is also difficult. And once again, the target for that for me would be till the end of my term, just because there is many changes to be made, and I do plan to start making those changes as soon as I get into my role, should I get elected.
Okay, well, fantastic. That's all the questions I have for you today, Miko. Right. Miko is going for SRC president. Voting will be taking place next week. Make sure that you all vote. Miko, is there anything else you want to add?
Just that you vote. You may not be voting for me, but that's okay. I hope that this interview and my manifesto can convince you that I am the candidate that wants to make things change in this university. So I hope you do vote for me, and that you vote in general as well.